Can everybody hear me? Is that all right? Enough? Thank you for joining us. I'm Jess. I'm the board secretary of LGBT Fans Deserve Better. We are a 501c3 charity nonprofit. We are an all-volunteer organization, and we advocate for positive LGBTQ rep in the media. Joining me today is Shelby Cohen, an engineer, military veteran, and LGBT Fans Deserve Better contributor. We are here to unveil our new TV scoring system, which ranks TV shows and networks by the quality of the representation, not just by the numbers, of LGBTQ characters on the show. So we're going to dive right in.
All right.
Because this is mostly you. So Shelby, can you tell us what the driving force was behind creating this scoring system and what makes it different from a standard report on LGBT rep?
So most of the standard reporting that you guys see from GLAAD, for instance, lists all the characters, and that's great that people give us characters, but that doesn't really talk about whether or not that rep is good or bad. Because just because you throw 100 gay characters at us, that doesn't mean that you're giving our community good representation. So a lot of, and especially right now because of what's happening, it's faddish for them to introduce a character as gay or bi and then do nothing with them or treat them really badly. So what we wanted to do was find a way to score shows and score networks and score TV, I guess, in a way that we could identify what was good and what was bad and good rep versus bad rep. So we could say like a combination of words and things, sorry. We could have the data in order to present it to networks in order to, or present it to the media in a way where we can have data that can prove that we're making a point. It's the same thing with the bury your gays, right? So everybody's like, oh yeah, they killed gay characters, but until someone said, hey, they killed 9 characters in 1 week, all of a sudden everybody picked up their head and said, well, hang on a second, I didn't know that was happening. And if we don't have some sort of a way to present that, then we're never going to be able to say this is happening because other people that aren't in our community can't see it. Sorry, that was not it.
No. So we're basically saying, I mean, because this last time that we've counted in 2017, there were over 200 lesbian, bisexual, queer female characters for the first time. And is that job done for us? Is that like we won because there's more representation? No. So we're not letting them off the hook with just numbers. We're saying now we're going to dive deeper into it. So how then did you go about establishing the criteria for the positive and negative tropes? Because not all tropes are bad. They're just sort of storytelling devices.
So we use a collective of already pre-established negative tropes and their definitions as a baseline. So obviously bury your gays is a big one. The like crazy lesbian character, right, or the evil lesbian character, and we use the guidelines that were already collected and already established, and then kind of created the positive side because that doesn't exist as much. People don't list positive tropes as often as they do negative. So we kind of created things that we thought were good representation for our community, and then weighted those so that we could give scores an even balance. So you're going to have to tell stories and things are going to have to happen, but we wanted a way to represent all of the good things that they do as well, so that we could balance the scoring between the two.
Mm-hmm. So how then do you make something like that objective? I mean, isn't like quality, isn't that opinion? I mean, isn't it, I like this show, I'm going to give it a good score?
A lot of that comes down to, we have a lot of discussions, group discussions, and kind of collectively decide as a group, and that works really well when you have people who aren't necessarily a fan of the show and people who are a fan of the show kind of collectively working that. But we built the tropes in such a way that the definitions are really as objective as possible. They're very, very detailed. So we know exactly what the guidelines are, and then we have to police ourselves and make sure that we're objective when we're scoring and make sure that I'm like, oh, I really like this character, so I want to give it, no, I have to do the right thing and give it the score that, so I personally, so I do a lot of this, I do a lot of scoring. When I do it, I have the trope sheet pulled up all the time, and I'm constantly referring to it to make sure that I stay within the details and the parameters and margins that we've set so that we can be as objective as we possibly can.
Excellent. All right, so we can take a look over here to our shiny, lovely site.
Yeah, so pretty.
So pretty, so pretty. So pretty. Looks much better than the Excel sheet that has like, you know, it goes on for miles.
The databasing.
Yeah. So looking at this, we have the highest ranking show, Winona Earp, doing very well. We have a lowest ranking show, Conviction, I don't know what they did.
I actually want to clarify this. So far, this is a demo set of data. So there are like shows that have scored differently, but we, for the first pass, put in the first grouping of shows that are fully scored and fully done. So I just wanted to let you guys know that it's a subset so far that we are presenting. So it's not like the full.
You kind of took samples,
samples from all the different.
Illustrate certain tropes and things like that. Okay, so conviction might not be the worst ever, but it's pretty bad. So I don't know. Can you walk us then through like a good show and a bad show, or a high scoring or a low scoring show here?
Sure. So Winona Earp is, if anyone here is an Earper, is a pretty. It's a pretty. It's a pretty clear good show. They have a lot of positive tropes. So, for instance, if you have explicit labels is a big one that they get. That you get credit for every time you explicitly label a character instead of subtext. You get credit for showing affection. You get credit if the partner is supportive. And a lot of Nicole and Waverly is them supporting each other through very difficult things, and we get positive scores for that. So they have positive. Of course, they still, in the course of storytelling, still have negative tropes that happen, right? So Waverly was slightly evil for a minute, but it was part of the storytelling. But they have so much positive that outweighs that it balances out, and you can clearly tell that it's still a really good representative show for us. And then, Conviction was the lowest scoring show. It's not up there right now, but that one was a good representation of one where they presented a character and then they did nothing with her. So they, in the very first episode, presented her as by actually in a scandal, right? She was seen kissing a girl, and her family was really upset about it. And then she was unstable because her family saw that she was gay and she was rebelling against them. That's not great, right? So they got negative scoring for that. And then they didn't show anything else to do with her being bi or part of the community or anything else. They just did it as a token character. And so it doesn't score terribly, but it doesn't score really well either. I think it was like a negative 77 or something like that. So those are kind of a two balance of what you see positive versus negative.
All right.
The internet.
I think that's been the story of the con here. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of the scoring that you've got now? You've given tropes kind of individual scores themselves, but they're not all the same. So it's not 5 points for this, 5 points for that. It's, if you do a trope and it's very negative, you're giving it a sort of a higher weighted, bigger score than something very casual. Very casual.
Yeah, so we've weighted, for instance, like Bury Your Gaze is weighted very heavily. Do we want to talk about how we break that down? So, and then we also, for Bury Your Gaze too, we know that characters have to die. So to make that objective, what we did was we broke it down by the type of character. So if you kill a guest character, it's still bad, but you only get scored negatively for that episode. If you kill a recurring character, then you get scored for that episode the first time badly, and then subsequently it's a lower hitting score, but you still get for the rest of the season. If you kill a season regular, that's much more impactful to the community. You get the negative first time trope, and then you get a trope for the rest of your show. And that's how we kind of broke that down to weight it a little bit better, because we know that shows have to kill characters, and that's going to happen, and we wanted to make it a little bit more well balanced. But things like an unstable character, if they're unstable specifically because of their sexuality, gets rated much lower than, say, a Bury Your Gaze would. And the positive tropes also weigh heavier. So if you show a couple kissing, that weights medium, but if you show an established relationship with a supportive family unit, that rates much, much higher. So we kind of try to balance it that way.
All right, are we back? Are we good? We're back. Okay.
Back.
Okay, so can you walk us through then Winona Earp, which is a high scoring show?
So we've actually broken it down. It looks a little long. It looks really pretty when you actually load it, I promise. So what we did with the data, and so it's really easy to kind of find specifically what you're looking for, is you can search by character, by show, by network, and then there's also graphs which are there, but zoomed in. So there's graphs, so you can see like what's scoring really well on the last season. So you can pull up the CW and say, hey, is the CW doing really well overall, or are they doing really well by the last season? Like maybe this last year, since it's been really in the media, they've all of a sudden stepped up their rep. You can see the difference between those two and kind of how channels are shifting as time progresses, which we think is really important to see if they're growing, like if they're getting better or they're getting worse. And so you can search by the character and you can see what tropes they're in. You can search by the show and see what tropes they carry, and their scoring, obviously. And then you can also search by trope specifically. So maybe you don't want to see anything with bury your gaze ever again. Maybe that's a trigger for you. You can go, once we have everything loaded in, you'd be able to go and pull up bury your gaze and you can see a list of all of the shows that have bury your gaze, and maybe you don't choose to watch that show. It's kind of hopefully maybe a little bit of positive that can be brought from it. But
All right, so did you want to, it's all right.
Oh.
So can you go to the top then, and we'll scroll down the page.
All right, so yeah, so when you go to the show, you see Winona Earp, and then it tells you the cable, or the network and the platform, and then its ranking. And then as you scroll down, you'll see the characters, which characters are lesbian and bisexual. We split that out. And then you can click on them actually and get more data, but for now we'll just go through maybe. I think it'll be a little bit easier. So you can see if they're alive or dead. You can see if they're recurring or not. You can see which negative tropes the show has and which positive tropes. So presumed dead is another one that we did for balance, because sometimes you'll want to, so if you don't actually see the character die, we'll mark them presumed dead. That counts a lot less than actually killing the character. And then if you bring them back, then the negative goes away. If you don't, then keep getting the negative scoring. So unstable. In case anyone's curious, that was because Rosita went crazy at the end. So in case you're like, wait a minute, there's no unstable characters, that was Rosita in the end if you watch one. And then you see supportive partner and showing affection. And sexuality is a non-issue, is another big one that if you show a character that's not struggling, all we get is we get so many coming out stories, right? But these people are established and they're just gay, and that's okay, and it doesn't matter. And so that's a positive trope as well.
And so the reason then that it has a score, then you can see that even you have your negative tropes. There's 4, even if some of them are weight quite a lot. Then you've got 8 on the other side, maybe.
Yeah.
9, 8.
Well, you also get points every time you show positive versus negative too. So even a show where you see only one, like you see 2 or 3 negative tropes, maybe they do that every episode, right? So maybe they have a character who's unstable and evil every single episode. That would weigh more heavily than if you had 1 positive trope for 1 episode.
That's right. So, and then the episodes, these are the ones with the characters?
The characters, yeah. And you can see the score breakdown by episode and which trope by episode, actually. Lots of data.
Yes.
So much data.
So the graph here then is the score by episode.
Yeah, score by episode. So you can see which episodes have the most impactful thing. So that's 212 or 210. So that's the alternate universe episode, I think. Right? So it makes sense that would be the highest scoring one. So you guys can kind of see where our scoring aligns with what you know in your own head to have happened. And then scroll down some more. I think there's the all right. Can we go to the network side? Like click on like sci-fi, I think. It's brand new, guys.
Yeah, honestly, I looked at it last year and I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's brand new. It's brand new. Yeah. No, they didn't open the page. Thought about it.
Well, that's the can I ask you a question about how I wasn't just asking.
Yeah, sure.
Come on, it's clearly an informal panel.
Yeah. Ask, please.
How do you deal with weighting the overall score for a show that's been on longer versus a show that's like, so Winona Earp that has a couple seasons versus the Bold type?
Right, that has one. So we calculate the scores. We rank them by latest season score, and we rank them by total score of the TV show. So right now we are ranking everything by the last season scored. So whatever the most recent season is what they'll get actual credit for in the overall ranking. And then you can see what they're over, because if they're doing a much better job, we want to give them credit for that. So that's why we decided to make that shift. At first we were ranking their overall, and then we kind of shifted to the latest season, because they're trying to do better. Let's give them credit for at least, trying to do better.
Oh, it's correctly zoomed. We are doing so much.
So
Thank you all for your opinion.
So network rank by average of all scored shows, you can see how they're doing, and then network rank by latest season scored. So this one's interesting because so ABC scored really well this last season, but overall they haven't done very well. So maybe they haven't been much. They didn't have any representation. Did I read it backwards? Oh, they didn't have any representation before, and now that it's in people's faces and they're paying attention, they're like, oh, hey, we're going to have some representation. So you can see the difference between how they've kind of stepped up in the last year.
All right, I'm curious about the negative. I want to know conviction. I really want to.
Oh, conviction. The internet in this hotel is amazing. Don't you guys have cell phone signal everywhere? Since yesterday. We tried to call each other from our rooms and couldn't get through. Conviction.
I didn't watch this one, so.
You didn't watch this one?
I'm glad.
It was one season. It has Haley Atwell in it.
It was actually a really good show. Like, I really liked it.
It was a good show. It was just not.
Stories and stuff.
They could have made her. They could have never said anything about her being bi, and it would have made any difference, like at all. So they would have really been better off in this particular instance as not having her be bi if they weren't going to do anything at all.
They could have also, if they had lasted longer, maybe they would have been.
That's true. Maybe if they'd kept up. So.
All right, so there you go.
There you go. Yep.
They did manage a positive trope.
They did manage a positive trope. I think she asked out her ex-college girlfriend who was currently sleeping with her boyfriend or something. It was not a great, like, it was a, see, here's where the objectivity comes in. Regardless of how I wanted to score it, she asked her out, they got the trope, so. Even if that girl was dating her boyfriend.
Okay.
So.
I've got a question.
Sure.
How easy is it to follow these rules that you've got set up to make sure you're negotiating those tropes and to actually come up with scores? I mean, how does another person assist in doing that? Because that's a lot of shows.
It is a lot of shows, and we definitely need help. So one of the things we were going to talk about is our dream for the future, if we could do it, is to create some sort of app or a web portal. We need web development if anybody wants to donate their time to let people score, like general public kind of score. We would have a review process where we would collectively as a group obviously review those tropes to make sure they were objective, but where they could input the time, because we also, on-screen time is something that we didn't talk about that, but that's actually something that we score as well, is on-screen time, because if you're shown like a character, every time a character is shown on screen, we calculate that and they get positive points for showing that character, and then they get positive points for scenes where they're on screen together. If like love interests are on screen together, that's scored higher. But where people can input, hey, I watched this show and this is what I saw, and input it in, and then we can take that data and add it into the database. We would like to, at some point, hopefully in the future, set up a way for that to do that. The way that we work it is, like I explained earlier, is I keep up the list of all the tropes, and it is very clearly defined. Actually, when this site is fully published, the tropes that we follow and how we follow them and all the guidelines are actually listed on here, so you can see exactly like these three criteria have to be met for this trope, this criteria has to be met for this trope, and we have it all broken down pretty specifically. So I think anyone who read through it would be able to pretty closely identify it.
On that note, can we click on the tropes thing and
See it?
yeah, I see it.
Yeah, see screen time. Sorry, I got it close to the mic. Screen time total for the entire series, 22 minutes. That one's a fun one too. It's really interesting to look at that, even for your favorite shows, when you kind of, it was shocking to me. Something that I was surprised at was even my favorite shows and my beloved characters. I looked at it and I'm like, okay, well this is 5 seasons with, well, like 12 episodes a season. Anybody quick at math? 40 minutes times, I don't know, 100 episodes. So let's say like 6,000 minutes. And you're like, my character was on screen 10 minutes. Awesome, great. 600 minutes of TV and you get 10 minutes of your character. So that was interesting for me to see. There should be a page where it actually explains the tropes. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Ooh,
See,
there we go.
so it's pretty drawn out, like exactly. So showing affection, any of these physical affection such as kisses, hugs, etc., enjoying each other's company. So domestic banter, verbal mention. So it's very specific as to what counts and what doesn't. And of course, we know that like we're not going to get everything right. So input would, we would always be willing to take input for things that maybe, we're not doing perfectly. But we've tried to we've spent months. It's been like 18 months in progress, this project. So we've been working on it pretty hard. Ask other question?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, so when we were having all kinds of excellent technical problems, we did mention barrier gaze, and so instead of having this be a single negative trope, you've broken it down a bit more. Can you go into that?
Yeah, because it's so impactful in the community and it has such a lasting impression on everyone. I mean, there was a panel, in fact, I think today about how you deal with the fallout of the characters, because especially in series, those characters become kind of your friends. You tune in every week to see what's happening in their lives, right? So it's some people who aren't parts of fandoms are like, oh, TV doesn't matter, but really you get attached, right? They become, especially 5 or 6 years in, they're kind of like friends of yours in a way. So if you kill one of those major characters, it has a major impact on the community. So we have, it's because of the residual effect, when you kill a main character, you get the negative score for the rest of the show. It's less impactful, like over time it becomes less of a substantial score against your show. But when you do that, like we need to show that that's not okay, and in order to do that, we needed to make sure that they understood the long impact. This convention wouldn't be happening at this level if people weren't still being impacted by the barrier gaze from 2016. We're 2 years later and we're still all negatively being impacted, so we wanted a way to make sure we carry that forward.
All right, so
You look confused. Do you have another question?
Okay. Or is it just the hollering from next door? All right. So it's broken down by type of character as well. So you get regular.
Yeah, so a guest is one, you get a negative trope for the character for the episode that you killed a guest character, and then that's if it's a guest. So like for instance, Grey's Anatomy shouldn't get negatively dinged for the whole rest of the series because they killed a guest character that came on for 5 minutes. And then recurring character, so that's 5 episodes or more is how we define recurring. Or 5 episodes or more in a season, you get the episode that they were killed, you'd get the first negative hit for the character dying, and then you would get a negative hit for the rest of the season. But then the next season you have a chance to do better, and it resets and you don't get the negative score for the next season. And then regular is forever. So
excellent. So how many shows have been scored overall? We have, I think, 10 in this demo.
yeah, we have 10 in the demo. We are actually currently at 62 that are either fully scored or in progress. Some of those are hard, like for instance The Walking Dead. So the newer seasons are scored, but we haven't had the time yet to go back and score 15 seasons of Walking Dead yet. So so the newer seasons are being scored, which is really the most impactful because it's going to be a representation of what they're doing now. And we would like to at some point go back and get all of it scored, but we're at 62 is what we're currently working through.
So how then are these shows chosen, like every show is going to be scored, or only those with rep?
Only the score right now. Only the shows with rep are being scored. I know future plans for sure, but we need people in the community for this. Is to add in also gay and trans and other LGBTQ parts of our community, we want to add that scoring in too, but we need representation from that community to be able to truly score it, because we want to make sure that they're represented and the things that matter to them are represented better than maybe we could represent that. So it is a future progression we would put. I mean, if we're only scoring rep and the show doesn't have any rep, then the score is going to be 0. So we can score those, but it's just going to be 0s.
What if you have nothing better?
If we have nothing better to do, just write database.
So does this then take into account anything behind the scenes? I mean, for instance, is sort of a new trend, as you say, for engaging on social media and sort of hyping up rep or potential rep, and then not following through. It's sort of some credit, but then
a little bit of baiting. We don't actually, because we want to score it from not everyone's involved in a fan base, right? Lots of people watch TV, but not everybody's in a fan base. And so if you weren't in a fan base, you would never see that information. So we score it from like if this was presented to an audience in a vacuum, that's how we present the data, because we think that that's the most effective way. Also, when we're talking about representation, the important people that see it really are the people that aren't in our community, that we need to be our allies and really understand, right? So we need them to see us in a positive light so that they can understand that we're just people. And they're never gonna, not never, but they're rarely going to see the behind the scenes or the star's Twitter or something like that. So we always score it from how it's being presented to the world at a flat surface.
So kind of going on that, so who's going to find this tool most useful? I mean, is it just for fans, or?
I think fans will find it useful because they can pick and choose or have an idea of the TV that they're going to watch. But I also think that the media could use it. They can go and report better on what channels and what shows and what things are doing better. But I also think that us as a community can use the data because we can use it to fight the battle. If we really want to have change, I think the best way to do it is to go to a network and be like, hey, listen, here's all of the things that you're doing and here's your scoring, and this is why you're not performing against your competitors, and maybe that's how we affect change.
So you were talking before about some future ideas for it. So what's the next step now? This is in demo. What happens next? So
the next step is for us to import all of the data that we have currently into basically this format. So we just have to take the other 60 or 50 shows and get all of that collected data, and then hopefully make more progress on scoring more shows, get more people involved. Like she said, we're a volunteer-only organization, so if we can get volunteers to put their time in to watch the shows, there's only so many hours in the day, and I can only watch so much TV. But yeah, if that's where we would want to get to, would be to have all of the shows with rep being scored so that we can have a really full, accurate picture of what are they doing over there?
I don't know. There's a
dance party? I thought it was the Holstein panel. What happened? But we would like to have a full picture of all of the representation across all of the channels, and then be able to present that data in a way that could be really impactful is future goals. And then of course, obviously, if we could find a way to help have people be able to input that data more effectively and easier would be also great.
Anything else that you want to touch on?
I don't think so. You guys have been very attentive to a technically
challenged
panel.
So I will then open the panel for questions. So anything from the audience?
I really want to know how Wentworth scores.
So yeah, Wentworth is a tough one because they have so many negatives and so many positives. They get a lot of bury your gaze and they get a lot of evil and unstable, obviously, because it's a prison show, but they have like 15 characters. So they're gonna end up scoring, like, I think they're probably somewhere in, like, they're not the most negative. So they're somewhere kind of in the middle where they throw so many, like, you have 15 characters, some of them are gonna be crazy, some of them are gonna die. It's kind of like a regular show. So they actually do kind of somewhere in the middle, I think. I don't know what their overall score is. I don't know that one off the top of my head. I memorized it.
294.
294, see? So, like, Winona's 400 and something, and Conviction was -6 or something like that, or -77. -77. So 2 something is right there in the middle range of rankings, where it has a lot of negative tropes and it has a lot, but it has so many characters that you expect that to happen. So we were able to show that it's a really fair scoring system, I think, in that way.
And I think this is a good example.
That was a great question.
Can you go back to the tropes? Where you have a barrier of gays
Yep.
in Wentworth, but yet it still has a positive score.
Yep.
So it won't necessarily kill off the show forever.
Right.
But
Right, if you have
it takes a
15
lot.
characters, you're going to kill one eventually. It's going to happen, right? But if all of your characters are gay. But yeah, so I think that's a really good point. It's a good representation that it won't kill a show to kill a character if they have enough characters to support that happening.
So, I mean, in a way, this is trying to open it up so that storytellers do have leeway to tell it if it makes sense in the context of positive storytelling, making them full people, having, all of this positive stuff to outweigh it.
Yeah. So yeah, if you have enough positive rep to have a community representation in a really good way, then you could still tell your stories. Just don't bring a character on and kill them. Pretty much. What was the 2016? I feel I don't remember the stats exactly, but I feel like it was something like a character with a 3-episode arc or less had a 0% survivability rate, or so. It was something crazy low, like very, very low. 3 episodes or less, it had almost no survivability.
Yeah.
So.
When it comes to the tropes, I can't see that, but is it looking at presence for community or presence of storyline? Like, we have tropes about the predatory butch, or is it just the generalizable, you're a lesbian or bisexual and we're worried about like the dead lesbian syndrome?
Well, so predatory lesbian is actually evil predatory lesbian is actually one of our tropes that we specifically rank. So it's not butch specific, but I almost think that maybe, this is just my personal opinion for a second, it might be better to just say, because any type of, we don't want to segregate ourselves or segregate that, really. We want all of our community to be treated equally and fairly, and it is a negative trope to do that, I agree, but I think that we should just give them a predatory mark for it instead of specifically saying, hey, why are you making this type of lesbian predatory? All predatory lesbians should be marked equally as bad in any form, because, I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. So. But you have something to add? Okay. Yes.
And now,
2 questions. There were a couple of times it sounded like, is this version of the website not up and running? Is it a beta?
It's a demo test of it right now. So
So if we go home, we're not going to see this right now.
No, so this is the demo just for this. What's going to happen next is that we're going to release a beta that people will obviously test, give us feedback. We'll do a focus group, I think. Sorry, this is why I'm not. And we'll hopefully, with your feedback, we'll improve it and make it better. So the full launch, we're hoping for before the fall of next year. So like the end of the summer, that's what we're hoping for. Because what we want is you guys to see it and tell us, this trope doesn't make sense. Maybe this trope is wrong. Maybe we need this trope. So we want your feedback to make it better. So no, this is just like, to see it so we can get that feedback so we can make it live.
And then the other question is kind of related. You mentioned like getting outside input. Would you consider like having like certain like reviews, like user posted reviews or whatever? And I don't know if they would have to be like reviewed or whatever, but like the reviews being reviewed to
absolutely.
It's something you've thought about?
Yeah, we definitely want to have a way for users to input how they feel, like if it's a, we were having a discussion recently about this actually. So we try to be objective as possible, but maybe we missed the mark somehow. And we would definitely like people to be able to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think that trope's just right. Like maybe I don't think that character should have scored or something like that. And we would like a way to have, it's definitely in the plans for sure, for us to have a way for people to make notes about what we've done and have it be a community, kind of a community system where we all collectively decide what we think is better or worse for our community. That's the whole point. Like, it's not us specifically, it's really about our entire community as a whole, and that's why the whole organization was created, is to have some sort of a way to represent our community and say that, hey, we deserve better and we can fight for that. You had the question next, I think.
Could you speak a little bit
bit more about how you came up with the list of tropes? Was it just like going through TV tropes and like, these are all the ones that relate to queer women? Or was it crafting, like we know this happens to...
It was a mix of, it was a mix of
It
both.
was a combination. I mean, there is the lesbian, bisexual tropes on like a TV tropes page, but that's not quite right for sort of what we do. There's a lot of ones that are like a little odd or a little specific.
Or mixed in with other communities that don't necessarily.
This is something that I think that our organization uses for, just kind of for reference anyway. So it is something, if I'm right, that you based on stuff that we collected before, it is something that was sort of crafted and honed. It started there, it was added and improved on, so it doesn't exist anywhere outside this. This is specific to that.
Yeah, we've specifically curated, like we've edited and curated them down to a way that's actually more objectifiable, I think, in a way that we can quantify it a little bit easier and a little bit clearer. And then some were combined, and we were like, hey, that maybe that's not quite right, so let's split it out. But it is something that we've kind of crafted over hours and hours and months of conversation. So, and there's a lot of gray area too. So we have a lot of, what do you do if a character dies but then comes back to life but then dies again? Or what do you do if they kill a character but then you find out that that character didn't actually exist? Shit. So it's a little bit more complicated sometimes, and we have lots of discussions.
Yeah.
We have 15, 20 people that are all trying to figure out exactly how to do that. So I think the more voices we have, the more accurate it'll become, because it'll become more objective as more voices have an input.
Good. All right, finally.
I gotta tell you, I'm really impressed. It's like, we need this. And I'm thinking, Autostraddle did a really great pull of information all together that is really clear. Basically, if you're talking to someone that doesn't get it, here's proof that this happens. And as this grows, this is just the start. Like, I'm thinking about where this will be in a year from now. This could be one of the top most valuable sources that you could use if you're talking to somebody, or let's say you bump into someone and you show them something. It's a tangible piece of evidence. What's a dream situation you see this website this? What you have, the collecting of data. Where would you like it to be idealistically in a couple of years?
I mean, what you're talking about is if you could pull up a website and say, bury your gaze, and say, here's the 50 shows that have done this in the last year, then that would be a really impactful thing to have in front of you, I think. And I would love for us to get all of the data collected so that we had a full picture of that, so that you could do exactly that. You're like, hey, I have these conversations all the time with people, and I'm trying to explain, they just make all lesbians crazy. Why is that? But then they're like, oh, what are you talking about? Because people outside of the community don't see it, right? It's not even people in our community. I actually met a lot of people recently that are part of our community that still don't understand, because they're not part of a fandom, or they're not a super fan of a show, that they don't even understand that this is happening. I had a conversation with 10 gay people in the last 6 months that had never heard of Bury Your Gaze. And that to me seems mind-boggling, because I'm so enveloped in what that looks like. But there's still a lot of people in our community that don't know about it too. So maybe if we can educate our own community too, then we can have that many more voices standing up, because that's what's really going to make an impact and a difference.
I mean, I think because if we're talking about, we're all impacted by TV, we're all impacted by the types of depictions of it, and which is why we're advocating for positive representation. It doesn't always mean happy stories, but it means avoiding these negative things that we see over and over and over, and maybe you don't even realize it, until something blows up, until they kill off a few too many characters at once, and then people realize it. But these things do happen over and over and over again. So clicking on the tropes and finding out just how many shows did it, I think that's a really valuable tool. And for creators, eventually I would like this to be something that we would say, stop going to that well. Stop making them crazy. Stop killing them off. Stop doing that. Here's
all of the things that you shouldn't be doing. I think actually, now that I think about, the unstable one is a great one, right? So it's one of those ones that nobody really thinks about, but it has an impact, because if gay people are always portrayed as unstable to the straight world, they're always going to think we're unstable. That's going to be the image. As much as we don't want to think that TV controls our view of the world. It does. If you go to other countries and you talk to them about America, they think America looks like what is on TV, because that's the purview that we have. That's what everybody sits in front of and sees every night. So if every gay character you ever see is unstable, what are you going to think about gay characters? And so that's one where it's something nobody really thinks about or pays attention to, but I think it's a subconscious impact on society as a whole as to how they view our community.
And self-image as well.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
You know, I think there's one thing, we have that great article, it's not just TV, it's talking about external perception, but it's also talking about self-perception, especially for LGBTQ youth, people who may not have access to a community. We all find that through TV as well. We all find, you know, that representation, and if it's overwhelmingly negative over and over and over and over again, that has an overwhelmingly negative impact. So it's definitely not something that we want them to get away with anymore.
Yeah. We got to hold everybody accountable. That's what this whole last year I feel like has been about, holding people accountable. So we just have to keep holding them accountable. Go ahead.
Do you have enough data yet to make any like connections or inferences or generalizations about like platforms or networks or like
Yes.
Male-run shows or female-run shows or anything like
Oh, the stats team has really good numbers. I wish I could. Something like 90% of shows are run by cis hetero white men, and of the 90% of shows that are run by them only, I feel like it was like 14. Man, I wish I could remember the numbers exactly. It's published on our website. Actually, they did a whole article about this. The representation in the 90% of those shows is something like 10 to 15%, I think, if I'm getting the numbers right. And then the representation among the 10% that are shows that are run by women or people of color or queer have like 60% representation rates or something. It's very stark. I wish I could remember the numbers exactly, but we actually published an article about it not terribly long ago, and they took all, because we have two separate teams. So we have a stats team that does just the stats with the characters, and then we have our side that does the more in-depth kind of grinding on the data. But yeah, it's definitely, there's a very stark difference. Same thing with like Netflix scores substantially higher in all representation than say like the CW. And yeah, you can definitely see broadcast. Broadcast is definitely its own. It has much lower score than cable. It's like kind of like broadcast cable streaming. Like you can see like it's a progressive increase, I think, in the freedom that they have to tell stories. For sure.
How fast could we actually do this if you had enough help to do the scoring?
That really, it comes down to the volunteer only, right? So all of us, because we're not paid and it's all volunteer based, it comes down to how much time do we have outside of our regular lives that we have to do. Sometimes for me that means I can sit for an entire weekend and spend 25 hours doing back-end databasing, which I have done. Sometimes that means I'm a little busy this month because I have things going on where I'm getting ready to go to Vegas and I don't have time to do any of it. So it really just depends on, one, the number of volunteers we have, and then two, how much time those volunteers can donate. And then, you know, if we can get enough volunteers that can donate a little bit of time or enough time to get it done, then we can do it as fast as the people involved can collectively do it. We've actually, for the amount of people that we have and the amount of data that we've collected, I think that we've done a really phenomenal job. I don't know how, I'm probably at like 200 hours of TV scoring plus right now, and I know for sure that you are as well. Like, didn't you score like the entire CW, oh no, all of ABC by yourself or something like that? Yeah. So, but it really, right now, because all of us, like when we started the project a year ago, there wasn't as much rep. Now all of a sudden, literally, I would have to watch 3 hours of TV every single day to keep up with just the CW, like almost like, not that they have great representation because they don't, but they have lots and lots of characters, so all of those characters have to be scored. So I personally would have to spend no less than 3 hours a day scoring TV to even remotely try to keep up with the TV that's happening on one channel. That doesn't give a whole lot of time. So we just need people, and resources is the key.
Yep.
Sorry, I talked a lot on that one.
So how would we do it if we wanted to volunteer? I mean, what?
If you go to lgbtfansdb.com, there's a volunteer button, and you can put your information in.
There's volunteer. That part, at least, we've made very efficient.
Very efficient. It is super efficient. The main website is super efficient. We have lots of really great graphs and things on there. This is just, it's a new platform. It's a lot of data. It's a lot of processing. It's a lot of time.
Yeah, so this isn't on there now, but can you go to the homepage for this one? Because it's pretty and I want to look at it.
It is pretty.
So, I mean, this isn't on, but if you want in on this, please contact us, sign up, and be part of the beta testing team.
Yeah.
Give us some feedback, improve this, and I think it can be just a better and better tool. And if anybody has skill sets, if we're going really wild, we would like an app at some point. So you sit there with your timer and your
It would be
tropes
great,
and you could click them off.
I made a really grungy version of that, just kind of like for us, where you can start and stop it, but if you pause it, then you can't use it. So it's it's a little bit complicated. So you could only use it when you're going to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to watch this show right now. But yeah, so if we could get, we're working on it. We just don't have the web development, and we're trying to learn it as we go. And so we're doing the best that I'm learning lots of things, but we're doing the best that we can as fast as we can. Any other questions? Yes.
We also have trans and non-binary tropes added to the list.
Absolutely, that is, but we want that community more represented so that we make sure that we cover what's important to them, because I think by and large, right now we are mostly bi or lesbian women, and so we want to make sure that those voices are heard appropriately, because we can't necessarily represent that as well as people in that community can. So it would be really important to have those voices be a part of that selection process on those tropes.
Because the trope specifically to that community would, I think, require an authenticity that doesn't come externally. And it doesn't mean you have to come knowing them, but we would need the help to make sure that we do it right.
And make sure that they get weighted properly. Maybe something that we think is not impactful is more impactful than we understand too. So.
Yeah, it's like this morning at one day at design, they were talking about the non-binary character and the they them pronouns, and they called her girlfriend.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because maybe we wouldn't notice that, just like other people in other communities wouldn't notice the things that pay attention to us. So I think it's just important to have as many of those voices as possible, so we do a good job. We want to do fair by all the communities.
Yeah. Absolutely. So.
Have you considered developing, or having a volunteer develop like a creator's guide that's more than just like a list of tropes, like based on the tropes, like here's what to look out for in your own writing, here are like questions to ask yourself as you develop a character, or as you develop like a season or a storyline, to like avoid negative tropes and reinforce positive tropes?
Well, maybe that's next year's ClexaCon. It is actually something that we've talked about. I mean, this is not necessarily to do with the TV scoring, but along with the tropes, along with sort of the advocacy, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we're the organization where the Lexa Pledge lived.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a creator's guide built into it itself. And that is definitely something that we intend, maybe with this behind it then, being a tool where it's a very visual, interactive learning experience that can show people not just a list of here's what you do and you don't do, but here's why this matters, and here's how then you're affecting your show, you're affecting the trajectory of things.
And here's the 50 other times that story's been told and how it's been told, maybe, right? So if you're a creator and you're like, oh, but this is a great idea, this is a great storyline to have her cheat on her girlfriend, and we're like, well, here's the 50 other times that story's been done, so maybe that's not a great story anymore. But how do you show that without actually having the proof that happened, right? So. I think that's, definitely on the list of projects. On the list of projects. Yeah.
We're trying to get through this ClexaCon.
We've all been just a little busy.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I would like to thank you, Shelby. Thank our crack
Amy.
tech team here.
Thanks for bearing with us and having patience and coming to see what we're talking about. We really appreciate it, and we hope that it's going to be important. And if you guys want to volunteer, please. Actually, that's how I got involved. Last year at ClexaCon, I saw a panel that these guys did, and I volunteered. And now it's one of the most important things that I work on. Actually, it gives me a real sense of purpose and like I'm doing something positive in our community. And it's made a really big impact on me personally, just to be able to say, hey, even if it's only a couple hours a week or whatever it is, I'm making a positive impact. And then it's been really helpful for me personally. So if you guys want to volunteer, it's helpful, but it also feels nice to do something that's a positive step forward.
Yeah. And we are all charming, lovely, welcoming people, attractive. I mean, thank you, everybody.